Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Double Dose of Raw Talk Podcast. I am your host, Miss D, and as you know, here on the show, we get pretty comfortable being uncomfortable. We talk about all the rawness and all the raw mess. Joined every week with some pretty dope friends and guests, we unleash all there is to know on surviving adulthood, and we discuss different topics related to cultures, controversies, sometimes a little bit about love, sometimes even sex. And we definitely oftentimes discuss relationships and relationships. Join me. We have juicy conversations, friendly debates, and sometimes intriguing discussions. So thank you for joining us on another episode, and I hope you enjoy the show. Okay, welcome back, guys. To another week and another episode, Double Dose of Raw Talk Podcast. I am your host, Miss D, and this week's episode is very unique, and I'll tell you why. We're just going to dive right in. The topic at hand that I wanted to dive into and open up about was supposed to be, it was originally planned to be discussed with a guest. And let's just say that if it's meant to be, it's going to be. And that type of a deeper dive discussion will have to be at a later time, because these days I've been blaming everything on Mars retrograde, and I think it's affecting all sorts of recordings. And there's just been so many hurdles for this, but in due time, that doesn't mean that Misty is not going to bring the rawness when it comes to this topic that I want to discuss. I want to open up. I want to shine some light on and keep very raw on it. And I'm going to take a deep breath, because it is something that is just a little bit of a trigger. And so I want to give a trigger warning right now to anyone out there who's listening who may have at some point in their life experienced some form of domestic violence, because that is exactly what I want to be able to share with you guys, my listeners, how recently certain things that have popped up have definitely been a little bit of a trigger for me, for a conversation, for reflection, for reevaluation. And later on in the show, and my second segment, I will dive into a most recent incident that happened this past weekend to me. That was also very triggering. So let's dive right in with our first segment of As Raw as It Gets. Here we go. As you guys may have already seen, if you guys are at all on Instagram and social media, and y'all know, if you've tuned into last week's episode, you know I shine some light on some celebrity divorce scandal, but there's also a little bit of another quote unquote scandal going on, and this one definitely hit home, way more than the divorce. I have been divorced, of course, so you know, any type of divorce and topics on spousal support hits home to me, but this week's episode hits home a little deeper when it comes to domestic violence and what I've come across on social media outlets, on gossip blogs, you know, this entire issue surrounding the allegations made against Joe Budden, a very prominent podcaster, you know, in this industry, and his two exes, Tahiri Jose and Sin Santana. Now, you know, let me just be very upfront. I, of course, follow all three on social media. I respect all three for many different reasons, and I've been following them for a very long time, including Joe Budden from his time of music. And it's very intense to read this scandal. And the reason why it's intense is because, of course, it's around the issue with domestic violence. And what was even greater of an issue to me was seeing the mixed messaging behind the comments, the commentary So let me begin by saying that instinctively, it was a bit of a trigger to me because I myself have dealt with domestic violence, and I am going to be very transparent on it as far as, with who, the when, and I guess I could say where. I mean, the location is here in the Bronx. But why it's so important to bring it out to the open, and of course where I am today with what I believe is not just one relationship but two relationships that have involved, one, domestic violence, and two, the dating violence. So I wanted to open up, shining light on these recent celebrity gossip allegations, because it's been it's been very triggering to me, and it's definitely made me go back to somewhat of dark times. So I want to take it back to the relationship I had with my son's father, my ex-husband, who, where we are today is not where we were then. Where we are today, we are excellent. Let me repeat, we are excellent co-parents. We have an amazing relationship and an amazing friendship. But there was a time that was very, 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 very dark. Let me be very clear on something else. Domestic violence is not only physical, and it doesn't have to be physical to be considered domestic violence. So with that being said, let me make it very clear that this man has never put a hand on me. But there were other behaviors that occurred during the very lowest of the lowest points in our relationship, where a lot of fear was set into my soul and my heart and my mind, where there were many times I did not feel safe. There were many times where I found myself not having a home. There were many times where I found myself being a single mom without a roof over her head. There were times where certain behaviors, certain reactions, certain what can I call it? Certain moments of anger led me to believe that I had to fight or flight. And it was not pretty. It was not at all, no moments of passion. It was not at all a pass because that was my husband. It should have never been that way. But when you're in the situation of being in domestic violence, where at that moment you sometimes don't even know you're in it, you later are able to identify it as such. But when you're in it, you find a million ways to sit there and say, well, I made him angry. Oh, well, I did something wrong. Oh, well, I could have done this better. You blame yourself for a lot of things. You start to question if you're worthy of that person. You start to question if you even belong on this earth sometimes, because you're battling within yourself. This is your fault versus do I deserve this? And it's a very disturbing battle to live. It is a very intimidating battle to constantly fight within yourself. And when I go back to reading, or hearing these women come to the forefront and tell their story, instinctively a lot of people, because, you are a fan of these people, of these celebrities, you start to question, well, why come out now and say it? You start to question, why didn't you say it before? You start to question, why did they continue working with him? They were all three at one point on the same show recording. And these are things that may have transpired possibly prior to those recordings. Definitely with his first ex, with Joe Budden's first ex, it definitely happened way before those recordings aired. But the thing about domestic violence, and I want to be so fair to the situation on all ends. The thing about domestic violence is sometimes it does take you that long to admit and to speak up about what it is that you've lived. Sometimes you do live in that much fear. Sometimes you do live in that much embarrassment, whether you're still in the relationship, whether you have a child with them, so you have to deal with them for the rest of your life, or whether you've even already walked away from that relationship and you have no romantic ties to that person. Sometimes it is just that difficult to be able to even bring up the topic without your voice cracking, without you just bawling out. And when the question comes up of why the now and not then, there are so many reasons to each person's truth as to why it takes us so long to come clean, to open up and to speak our truth about what it is that we lived during such a dark time. Now, the reason why I say that when it comes to the piece of why not then, why now, is because what I was going through during my time with my ex-husband, no one knew. No one. When I tell you absolutely no one knew. I pushed my friends away. I made sure that my friends had no chance whatsoever to come over to my home. There was a point where my friends did not meet my son, who you guys know. His name is Marcus. Until maybe like he was 6, 7, 8 months, maybe. I shut out my friendships. I cut ties with a lot of people. I limited my own visits to my family's house because I didn't want them to pick up on any vibes that were off, and they were surely off. I did not communicate as much with my sister and my mom like I once did. When I first moved out of my home to just live with this man, to cohabitate with this man, I would speak to my mom and my sister every day. And when things turned really, really ugly between us in our relationship, I slowly pulled away from them, secluded myself, and I wouldn't communicate with them that much. They had no idea of what was going on. When things started surfacing where I had no choice but to turn to them and they finally became aware, I made it my business to cover it up and to sugarcoat it as much as possible because I did not want an entire feud to erupt, because I kept thinking to myself, at the end of the day, that's still my family. That's still my son's father. I bring that to the table, to this mic, because going back to what was so triggering with all these allegations surrounding these celebrities is that's exactly what this single mother is saying as to why she didn't come to the forefront to just, leak an audio about her son's father. This in reference to Sin and Joe Budden, because she sees it as that's still her family. She still has to protect her son. She still has to protect her space and her peace. She doesn't want anything haunting her child. It all became too familiar to me. It all became so triggering to me. It all became real to me that we who lived through some form of domestic violence, whether physical, whether mental, and even emotional, or all together at once, we don't realize how many of us are out there living this life or have lived this life. We don't realize how many times the story repeats itself over and over again. And yes, we could sit here and we could point fingers and we could say how horrible of a man this person is for doing that to me and whatnot. I want to be fair on that side of things, on the side of choosing to protect this family, because I understand that point of view of, at the end of the day, that is my son's father. And at the end of the day, I knew then that I would have to learn how to work through all of it, all the dark times, all the history, move forward from it, and rebuild a co-parenting relationship. As many of you know, I am in a space where that is very successful in my life. Thank God for that. And where we are today has a lot to do with us having spoken our truths to one another, and having apologized to one another, and having forgiven one another about a lot of the things that happened in our relationship. But it doesn't change the fact that I was once in a space where I told no one, and it took forever to speak my truth. Just like me being a regular person, many public figures go through it. They don't come to the forefront immediately to speak on it. Not everybody goes running to file a restraining order. Not everybody goes running to file divorce papers or file any type of court documents to protect themselves. Some, whether you are a regular person or a famous person, some or most of the time, most people do live in fear of what can happen to you if you do open your mouth. If you do pack your bags one day and try to escape and leave with your son in the middle of the day while you believe they're at work, and then boom, they show up. And suddenly you're seen at the door with luggages, with a baby in your hand, trying to leave and walk out of their life. And then suddenly the manipulation begins. And then suddenly the guilt tripping begins. All of that is what a lot of us lived through during the time of domestic violence. All of that is what we experience, what we're battling against within ourselves and within our homes. And it's hard. It's so hard to find the courage, to be brave, to find the voice, that strong voice deep inside you, to be able to come out and speak on it and say and ask for help. Ask someone for help. So when a lot of the commentary that I saw when it came to Tahiri finally opening up and saying what she had lived, a lot of the commentary definitely geared towards the question of why not then, why now? And I won't lie, having been someone who has lived it, I still asked myself that question. I still asked that question when it came to her. I still sat there and I still said, why not then, why now? Because you still recorded with him, because you were still in the same room with him. You know, some of the commentary on these gossip websites even said, you know, I could never record with a person just for a paycheck if I know he hurt me. But you know what? Every person's different. Every person has their own story. Every person, you know, Tahiri probably didn't record because of him. She recorded for herself. And maybe maybe this was all part of her journey to be able to come to the forefront and speak on what it is that she lived. To be fair, when it comes to Sin's take and her outlook on the family piece, just like I said previously, when you do have a child there, you as a mother, you do feel like you have to do everything and by all means protect that child, even if that means protecting the other parent who may have hurt you. And that is a whole other battle, because while there is one battle that you could possibly end when you break up with the person, when you have a child, that battle never ends. There's always a potential that that fight might start again. There's always a potential that a similar fight might start out of nowhere, similar to the one before, triggering like the one before. And so I understand also her take on it. And so when I see people questioning her, when I see audio being leaked of hers, when I see court documents that she wrote up, that she submitted, and yes, they're all over the internet, court documents of what concerned her as to why she was fighting for custody for her child, I get it. I understand it. Because again, when you live in fear of being hurt, because at least for me, it did not get to the point of physical where his hands were on me to hurt me. But you still live in fear of the what if it becomes that. You do sometimes go when it comes to custody battles, and you do have to sometimes put it all on a piece of paper to fight for your family, to fight for your child, to defend your child, to make sure that your child is safe, to make sure that nothing happens to your baby. Yet at the same token, as a mother, you have to then decide, well, this man is still a good father to him. Shitty man to me, but still a good father to him. He still needs his relationship with his father. And all of that, when it comes to, at least with this situation, and it's not about dissecting. Let me be very clear once again. It's about how relatable this was to me. It's about how relatable it was to my past. It's about how relatable it was to my life. It's about how triggering it became to me. And it took me to a place where it made me realize, like I said before, it made me realize. I did a lot of reflecting. I did a lot of reevaluating. I did a lot of soul searching and realizing just how triggering, and seeing this simply on social media, this was to where I am today versus where I was then. Now, I want to dive a little deeper into this, and I want to stray away from the conversation of, what that celebrity gossip was. I just wanted to highlight it so you guys can understand where the triggers came from for me. Where I am today, and I want to be a little bit transparent on this because I have contemplated for quite some time speaking on domestic violence, because at the end of the day, here on this platform, it is raw talk. We do discuss, controversial shit of adulthood. We keep it raw, all the rawness, all the raw mess, as I always say it, and what you see is what you get with me. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. A long time ago, I said, I'm a little bit of a mystery and a mystery to discover. And when I say to discover, it's also, I also have to put my work in and continue to open up to you guys and let you in on why I am Misty, why I am Daisy, why I am the way that I am, who I was then and who I am today. I say that to say, I have been told a few times, and I've said this before, and it's been told to me jokingly because, I joke here and there about my quote unquote violent ways, right? When it comes to, pulling out knives, it is something that really did happen. It is something that became a defense mechanism for me. It's something that I did turn to in a very dark moment, just like I explained it to you previously, in a very dark moment where I felt finally I had the courage to defend myself, because like I said, it was fight or flight. It was the last incident. It was an incident where it did become violent to the point where I did feel I had to protect my child. It was the incident where it was the last straw for me. It was the incident where I felt like I had to look over my shoulder because I felt like something was coming after me. I felt like I was targeted. It was the incident where I felt like it was do or die. And it was the incident where I realized that I had to get out of this relationship because it was going to be either him or me. And let me just say this, that it was at that moment, after everything I had already gone through, it was at that moment that I realized that it was no longer about him and it was no longer about me. It was about my son. And it was the realization that I had a little life in my hands, who to raise, who to love, who to defend, who to protect, who needed me. That was the reason to why I had to get out of this very, very unhealthy, toxic marriage. That was the beginning of the end. I have no regrets from it, from nothing that happened before that. And I am going to dive a little deeper as to the things that happened before that. Because if there are any listeners who do think, well, my partner has never put a hand on me, so it's not domestic violence, that's not true. I will say it again. No, I did not get hit by a hand or a kick or a pulling of the hair or anything like that. But there were moments of rage where items were thrown at me. There were moments of rage where things were directed at me. So I'll give you an example. In an argument, while holding my child, the door gets slammed right in the direction of my arm. And I had to turn so it didn't hit my child. So it ends up hitting my other arm. Now you may think, oh, that's nothing. Well, when it comes to a moment of anger and a moment of rage, it's something. Now, this is just an example of small arguments, small moment of rages, but it all builds up and it all gradually increases to a more aggressive level the next time. There was once a time where I found myself with a baby and I was in the street at 3 a.m. with our belongings in garbage bags. There's many moments where it was full of a lot of manipulation. And all throughout this happening, not once did I think I was living in a situation of domestic violence, because again, he did not physically come to attack me and to hurt me or to beat me. And I want to make that very clear, because when it comes to domestic violence, it doesn't have to take that for anyone to be living it. So I want to make that part extremely clear. It took me years later, while seeing a therapist, to realize what it is that I was living then and what it is that I basically got out of and survived, in a sense. Because had I stayed in it, imagine how much darker it would have gotten. Imagine how much violent, how much aggressive, or what else could have happened, right? So I want to shine light on that piece. I also want to shine light to another aspect of my life that happened right when I got out of that relationship. Being a young single mom at this point in my early 20s, I did not know how the hell I was going to survive life. I had just finished school. I was out in the workforce looking for a job to start a career, right? To be able to provide for my child. Not that I thought he wasn't going to, but to be able to provide for my child. And I hit a very, very deep and low depression. And it got so deep, it got so dark that there was a point where I started using pills to fall asleep, to be completely knocked the fuck out. Because literally it felt like the entire world was crumbling down on me and I didn't know what to do with it. And I just didn't want to feel any more that emotional and mental pain that I felt. And I say that because I want to be very transparent on what it is that helped me to get out of it. And again, it was the therapy. At that point, when I had finally allowed my mother into what was going on, she is who picked up on the behaviors that I was showing. And she is who also helped me get out of that very dark time of my life. When it gets to the point of desperation, of depression, of loneliness, that at that point you fought so hard to protect and defend your child And then you hit so low that you forget the importance of being a mom to your child. That sometimes you do dive so deep into darkness that not even your child can help you get out of it. And all of that is a full-blown cycle. All of that is a full-blown cycle from the domestic violence beginning. And I would say end, but it never ends because that stays with you. And I will dive into that a little bit more. Through the depression, through, in my case, needing therapy. And I say in my case because therapy doesn't do it for everyone. And then it is to maneuvering life after that. Because here I am with a child and I still have to see this man who still has to be a father to this child. And I could sit here and give you a whole bunch of details as to all the drama surrounding the divorce, surrounding the child support battle, surrounding the custody battle. But at the end of the day, we all know that all of that is extremely, extremely ugly. So to give those details defeats purpose to what the focus is today surrounding the domestic violence piece and why it was so triggering to me recently. And I come to realize that all of that impacted where I am today and who I am today. Today, I've said this many times on my IG lives, on previous episodes, I'm pretty sure. Today, who this man was once is not who he is today. And I'm extremely proud of him for that. The father he is today is by far the most amazing father I've ever come to know. And my son is the utmost happiest child at the young age of being a young man at 13, who has an amazing relationship with all his parents and who has an amazing bond with his dad. Who I am today is a woman who has been able to grow and be strong from her experience with domestic violence. And I've been able to forgive, and I've been able to find a new person in that individual, in my son's father, to be able to develop a whole new relationship as parents. Because I would be completely lying if I said that I thought he was a pure harm today to my child. I want to be very clear and honest about that. Recently, I had dealt with several people, telling me that I exude confidence, or I am very confident, things like that. And when I've come to realize about, my confidence level, when I've come to realize about, who I am today, like when people tell me, oh, your eyes are so telling, or, you're so strong, or you look so strong, or again, going back to this word of confidence, to me, I have to admit, and I have to be very transparent, that the confidence that I quote unquote exude, the fact that I am a confident person, and yes, I can show that in my physical ways, in being, a woman of plus size, a woman who embraces all her curves, a woman who, from a physical standpoint, feels sexy each and every day, right? But then it's the part where I actually have to believe it. And then it's the part where I mentally do actually see that every day, and I do. Every day. No matter my struggle, no matter what insecurities I may have, because let's face it, we're human. I am a human and I have them. I am really and genuinely a person who does live by confidence and is very confident. And I realized after being so triggered with a lot of these things that came up just on social media, and this is not just this week, which is one group of celebrities. We're talking a long time coming. And let me be very clear on something. Domestic violence doesn't always just happen to women. It also happens to men. Okay? But I say that to say, in seeing all of this and being so triggered, I realized that it was that dark time in my life when I was put down every day, where I felt so belittled. I felt so trashed and so dragged. I felt so not worthy of anything. And coming out of that feeling, coming out of that headspace, being brave to walk away from something so dark, so emotional, so could have possibly turned to the darkest of violence, right? That is how I started to build up myself, rebuild myself. That is where I started to appreciate myself. That is where I started to love myself. And even when I had a moment after that where my weight was just so bad, and it all flowed right after the depression. And then even with a weight loss journey, the real levels of confidence that and being confident that I embody comes from the bravery that I found when walking away from my marriage, when walking away from such a horrific situation of a horrible relationship. It comes from there. I had to sit here and reflect on it. I had to sit here and reevaluate. I had to sit here and really dig so deep into realizing, how is it that I've come to the place where I am today? How is it that I don't allow, the hiccups, like I said before, the insecurities, all of that? How is it that I don't let that take over me and bring me down today? And it's because of that. I've gone out there, I've dated, and even with dating after that divorce, there was still another relationship that I dealt with, and I'm not going to dive into it today. But there was still another relationship that I dealt with that, in actuality, he was a narcissist. And that one I believe I should classify that, and I will probably dive into it in a later episode with dating violence. I still ended up in a vicious cycle, and I still ended up in another relationship that was even far more toxic than what my marriage was. And that would lasted a little bit longer until the last straw hit and I finally cut it off, right? But again, there goes that cycle. Again, there goes the in-depth damage mentally, emotionally, because again, mine was not physical, that it led me right into another situation so similar to that, probably, if not even worse. Okay? And where I am today is a true reflection of that entire journey. Is a true reflection of everything that I've overcome, everything that I've survived, everything that I'm able to say, yep, that was me then, and this is me now. And I have no shame in it. I have no shame in my story. I have no shame in when it comes to my son's father. I have no shame in who we were then and who we are today. If anything, because of the lifetime connection I have with him, I am the most proud of us today than ever before. I was triggered. I was very triggered and had to sit there and figure out why I have been recently getting so many uneasy feelings. Why recently I had to really dig deep when several people have come to me and spoken to me about my confidence and being confident. Why I knew what the many journeys I've been on that have helped me to get there. But I had to dig deep to really figure out, where is it that I became that person all over again? Where is it that I could sit there and say, I am who I am today because of that? And it is from having gotten out of that domestic violence relationship, having moved on from it. And it's important. It's important to speak on it for me personally and be transparent on it. Because I do firmly believe that just like me, there might be someone out there who is living it. There might be someone out there who doesn't realize it. There might be someone out there who is affected by this and they just don't know who to turn, or they don't even realize that this is the situation they're in. And I'm here to say my story on it, like I said in the beginning of the show, because there was something that happened fairly recent that just added to the triggers. I'm here to say my story on it because you just never know who can listen, who it can resonate with, and who can sit there and say, you know what, that's me. That's what I'm living right now. And I need help. I need help to get out of it. Because at the end of the day, there's always going to be people who are going to question you. There's always going to be people who are saying, well, why are you telling us now and not then? And again, like I said before, I too raised that question because I asked myself that same question so many times about my story, about what I lived. There's always going to be people asking a question. If you have a child with that other person, then there's going to be people who are going to bring up all the other issues that come up when it comes to a child. All the other issues. The greater the ties, the greater the legal matters. Period. Believe that. And the longer it takes, believe that too. People are always going to question. People are always going to sometimes make you feel like you have to question yourself. Like, is that really what I lived? Is that really my story? Am I overthinking it? Maybe it is. Maybe you just need to find the right person who to talk to, who to turn to. Perhaps. I don't know. But I felt like in seeing all of this coming up, and again, not just with one group of people, we've seen it. We've seen celebrities get shot during an argument with their boyfriend. We're seeing some male celebrities filing restraining orders claiming that their female partners have attacked them. We're seeing it just keeps coming up. I want to say it's an issue that will never go away. As long as there are people who are battling their own demons, as long as there are people who refuse to get help for them, there is always the potential that any given situation and any given moment can always turn violent. Why do I say that? Because going back to my point, in a fight or flight, I did turn and grab a knife. And thank God that I remembered I had a child. It's not easy. It's not easy to face that. It's not easy to battle that. It's not easy to battle yourself. It's not easy to face it. It's not easy to wake up. It's not easy to say, this is enough. I'm done. And then take those next steps. None of it is easy. But I felt that even though it wasn't easy then, and even though it's still not easy today, it is a little bit easier for me to speak on it. And in seeing all of this coming up and just triggering me, it's been triggering me. It's been hitting home. It's been getting to me. I just felt like I needed to open up about this and just put it out there. Now, moving on to the next segment of Double or Nothing. This was the cherry on top for me, and I wanted to make this part of this conversation because it happened just this past weekend, and I wanted to be able to share it in more transparency, because I realized, after really thinking about it, after analyzing what it is that occurred, I realized I was triggered again. I realized that in that moment, it felt like fight or flight. I realized that in that moment, I entered such a panic and so much anxiety that although I did something, I didn't know what I was doing. I instantly became so scared and so fearful that it took over me. And there's so much now that I realize I could have done better and I could have done differently, but I was triggered. And all those fears that once was there, despite how strong I am today, despite all the confidence I have, despite how confident I am, I instantly, in that moment, went back to that fear from way back when. So let me explain what happened. This past weekend, I took a cab home from the end of my shift. And it was a little before 7 p.m. Now it is starting to get a little dark outside. Sooner rather than later like it did earlier in the summer. Shout out to summer 2020. There it goes. And I ordered a cab from the company Via here in New York City. And everything seemed fine at the beginning of this cab ride. Now, since there was a cool breeze, I decided to put down the window. And, the driver was just going. The direction seemed pretty clear to me. He seemed to be going the right way. For those of you here in New York, and if you're not, you could possibly look it up just to follow the route if you want to. But for those of you here in New York, it's probably going to be easier for you to be able to picture this. I was on the FDR with this cab driver, and heading to the Bronx. And instead of him going towards the right, towards the Bruckner, he ends up going the opposite way. It wasn't so much of him making a mistake and turning the wrong way. It was his behavior that really alarmed me. So he did not just take a wrong turn. He ends up going all the way to the far end, where if I wanted to open the door, there would be nothing there but just oncoming traffic. I'm like, you're going the wrong way. And this driver says, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I'll get off at the next exit. So I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, just get off at the next exit because you could just turn right back around. He doesn't do that. I tell him again, he missed the exit. He needs to get off on the next one. Again, all the way far to the end of the lane, of the last lane, oncoming traffic to my side of the door. We keep going. He is not turning. He's not going into the lane so he can exit. So once again, I tell him he's missing the exit. Okay, I'm sorry. At this point, he's driving fairly fast. And at this point, he's not listening to what I'm saying. He's just going. I instantly now become extremely nervous because I'm noticing that he's not making any efforts to get me out of this highway and get to an exit. As he continues to go, I'm then noticing how far out I am to the complete other side of the Bronx. And I start arguing with him a little bit. I start telling him, you're going the wrong way. I've already told you several times you have to exit over here. And he goes, yeah. I'm checking now. I'm sorry. And when I see him checking his phone, I notice that he's not really checking the directions anymore. Now he's going into a screen where he's chatting with someone. And I'm like, where are you going? So at this point, since he's not answering me, I decide to go into the Via app and I alert for an immediate live chat. Let me say this. I pressed the button to call 911. But at that moment, I cannot tell you if the call went through. I'm pretty sure it did. I'm pretty sure I was speaking to someone. But in that moment, I wanted to speak to someone in real time. And that's when I started with the texting, with the live chat. Immediately, someone came on the live chat. Immediately, I told them what was going on. I asked them to track my route. They did as such. They escalated it in real time. They asked me to stay on the chat, chatting with them. They confirmed that they have tracked who the driver is. They kept asking me where he was taking me. I kept telling them. And At this point, I'm letting him know, like, you're going the wrong way. You're going the wrong way. He finally says that he's going to get out. I'm like, cool. So when he's finally getting out, at this point, I'm a little bit familiar with the area where he gets out, but it's fairly dark now at this point. And it's basically, it looked like it was like a park. And I did not quite feel comfortable just jumping out of there at that moment, to be very honest. But because I had the window down, I felt pretty okay. He instantly locks the door and he starts to put up my window. And that's when I start the arguing. So I tell him, why is he putting up my window? He needs to put my window down. He says, oh, I'm sorry. It was a mistake. I meant to put my window up. So I put down the window again. And at this point, I go, you don't need to lock the door. It's not like I'm going to get off this cab without paying you. The company already charged my card. You don't need to lock the door. Unlock the door. So he unlocks the door, right? I'm still chatting with Via. And at this point, I decide to pretend like I'm going to call, because I got nervous that if I start a call, that it might take out the chat, the live chat that I had with the representative of this company. So I start pretending like I'm going to chat on a call, chatting with someone. And this is when he starts to get a bit alerted. So he starts apologizing at this point. And I'm like, I don't want to hear it. Just get me to my destination. I said, you've taken too many long turns, too many wrong turns. I should have been home half an hour ago. I've been in this car for more than an hour. You need to get me home now. So he sees me being far more serious with this at this point. And I notice as he's driving, and he's driving at an okay speed. He's no longer speeding. Of course, we're in local streets. I notice as he's driving, he's looking at the directions as to how to get me to my destination, which is my home. Now, let me be very clear, and I'm going to suggest this at the end of this segment. He did not have my accurate address. I noticed that he switches again to a chat on his phone. And I notice he's chatting with someone, saying something to them. They're responding. He's saying something to them. They're responding. Like, it's an active conversation. It's like as if somebody was waiting for him to chat with them. And then he goes back to the directions and he's like, okay, I know now how to get you to your home. When he finally gets me to my destination, which tip number one that I've started to do, I don't put my exact address. I put like 2 houses up or 2 houses down. I don't put my precise address. And I always wait till the car drives off before I get into my home. So when we finally get to my quote unquote destination, he wants to turn around and look at me and say that he's so sorry for what happened. And at that point, I was like, I don't want to hear it. I got out the car and I completely slammed the car door. When I got upstairs, because literally when I tell you, my heart stopped during that entire encounter. His entire behavior was so off. The fact that during the entire ride, he was not entirely apologetic. The fact that during the entire ride, he refused to turn around to look at me. He only did that at the end of the ride. The fact that there was so many mistakes made as far as directions go. For someone who was reading the directions continuously, allegedly, and then was going to that chat. But for a driver who was doing that to still continuously not go into the right lane to simply exit a highway and then stay all the way to the last lane. So I have no way to open this damn door, because if I opened it, and believe me when I tell you, I thought about it for 2.5 seconds. If I open this door, what are the chances I'm going to be able to just jump the fuck out? Because the cab itself at that moment just became so eerie. The entire drive became so dead, so cold. The amount of discomfort that I felt was so overflowing and excessive that it instantly triggered my fears, instantly triggered my anxiety. I felt like I couldn't breathe anymore, and instantly triggered me to the point of a panic. That in me pretending to be on a telephone conversation is what helped me calm down and stay focused. That's what helped me. I don't know what I could have possibly done at that moment if I didn't even get on a live chat with someone from the cab company via, let me say it again, to speak with them and be guided by them in that situation. I don't know if I would have been able to do the same, say, with another cab company, because to be quite frank with you, I have never, in all my times taking cabs with these cab companies, I have never had a situation like that. I realized when I got up here, I had accidentally dialed a call to a few friends. And I realized when I got up here to my house that when I got up here, I realized that I had dialed them incorrectly. And I wanted to call them again to let them know that I was okay, like, so they didn't think I was rude. And when I got on that call with them, I instantly broke down. Literally all the feelings of fear and anxiety and panic, it was like they came all the way up to my throat in pure fucking vomit. Except I didn't really throw up. I just bawled my eyes out and I cried hysterical because of just how much in fear I had been at that moment. After a few days of disputing back and forth with this company, me getting my refund, filing all the necessary reports, and certainly never using this company again, despite whatever methods of service recovery they attempted to do with me, I started to rethink what happened, what occurred, what I felt, the behaviors this driver demonstrated, the encounter itself. I started reassessing it because I want to never again be in a situation like that without being fully aware. We don't realize how often this is happening, even in a cab ride. We don't realize how many times women are being, let me not say just women, people, passengers are being assaulted or attacked or kidnapped or things like that. We don't realize it. It was in me sharing this little bit of the story in brief detail during a live IG that I was informed that these type of reports are actually very public, which for some stupid reason, as someone who takes so many cabs, I did not know this. And in pulling up these reports and seeing these reports and realizing how often a lot of this shit happens, it just made me realize that at that moment, even though I had never been in a situation like that, the amount of fear that I felt, the amount of how triggered I was from that moment, I realized that it was the same fear, that same feeling, that same uneasiness, that same feeling of feeling unsafe, feeling like I was in danger, feeling like it was fight or flight, feeling like something was going to happen to me, was the same exact of those feelings that I felt during the time of me being in those very dark domestic violence moments. I realized just how triggering that was, where I felt like I had to try and do something to survive this. I felt like I had to do something to defend myself. I have a kid at home. Nothing can happen to me. If something happens to me, what's going to happen to my kid? I did not realize just how triggering that situation can be to bring out all these old feelings, but the exact same ones. It was like deja vu, the exact same ones. And they just resurfaced all in that moment. It was the exact same thing. To say that I am fully aware of my surroundings today, I can't say that entirely. I've been, like I said, reevaluating over and over again that incident, over and over again, how I felt, over and over again, the millions of things that went through my mind at that moment. And once again, I feel like it's an occurrence, a recent one in my life that I feel like can't keep quiet on, that I feel like I had to share a little bit of more detail on it, especially the behavior of the driver, so that if any of my listeners ever at all feel like something is completely off with a simple cab driver, or they're noticing certain behaviors, just please be aware and act fast. Fight or flight. Do what you need to so that you stay safe. I can sit here and tell you that I have said to myself, you could have done this differently, you could have done that. But in that moment, going back to what I said before about domestic violence, in that moment when you're in it, you don't always realize what's going on. You don't always realize how you should act or what you could do or what you should even say. It's just happening. And when fear takes over you, when panic takes over you, when anxiety takes over you, and you get into this mode of, oh my God, what do I do? The rest is easier said than done. I promise you. But at least for me, having just gone through something, and while it may seem so small, in that moment, it was just so bad. In that moment, it was just so uncomfortable. In that moment, it was so fucking scary. In that moment, I just couldn't stay quiet with this. I could not sit here and speak on a time of my life of certain emotions and ignore this when those same emotions resurfaced. I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't go without sharing it with you guys. What just happened to me also helped me reflect and also helped me reevaluate once again, just as a person and as a woman where I am today. That despite the confidence that I may have, despite my strength, despite being confident, despite knowing how to cheer myself on and be my number one fan and be my number one motivator, despite my ability to inspire myself to be better today than what I was the day before, I am still human. And there are insecurities I battle and I face. And sometimes there are situations that I find myself in that I don't entirely have control over, that sometimes last longer than others, that are of darkest times. And I am able to come out of that. I have been in the past. While I'm able to admit and face those fears, I'm able to find my courage and I'm able to be brave and I'm able to at least think and do something so that I could come out of it and maybe even come out of it a winner. And when it comes to these scary situations, whether it is domestic violence, dating violence, whether it is just a toxic relationship, whether it is a scary as fuck cab ride, because it was just that, and then some, whatever it may be, where you find yourself in such a situation and all that fear can still take over you, it is with that bravery and that courage that I today embody that I am able to exude that confidence and be confident. And that I strongly believe I've been able to grow from my story with domestic violence. And that I strongly believe that maybe that is what helped me act fast as I could in real time with what just happened to me this past weekend. Now, I don't know if there is anyone out there who are my listeners who may have ever been in such a scary situation and may have possibly been triggered to another dark time in their life. Or if there is anyone who has dealt with any type of domestic violence. And again, I say any type. I cannot stress this enough. Domestic violence is not just physical. It is also mental and it is also emotional. Too many people are still falling victim to domestic violence. And I say people because it is men and women. It involves a lot patterns of behaviors from the other person, from your partner, to be able to control a situation, to be able to manipulate a situation, especially when it's not physical, especially in those times. Okay? And I just think it's important to really put it out there, to keep it as raw as we can when it comes to this topic. Because if you notice one thing I said about the partner and patterns of behaviors, once again, it was that behavior that I noticed in a driver that made me feel unsafe and uncomfortable. It is something that domestic violence, it just doesn't end. Everything that comes from it, it just doesn't go away. It does stay with you. You just have to work to grow from it, work towards learning from it and being stronger, finding your strength, finding the courage to walk away from it. That's what it's really about. Don't be afraid. Don't hold yourself back from speaking your truth. And if there's anyone out there who is yet to be a survivor, if there is anyone out there who doesn't know who to talk to, doesn't know who to turn to, I will be including some information in the show description where you can reach out. Or if you'd like to share anything with me, you can also do that. This has been a little bit intense for me, but it was definitely necessary to do so because it's been plenty of a trigger for me, and because I strongly feel like all of that is what helped me in my most recent scare. I couldn't go without sharing this with you guys. So I thank you so much for tuning in, for listening to this. And I hope it helps someone, anyone. And if it's not you who it can help at this moment, and you know it's someone who can possibly use this as a comfort to know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, that some people are able to find their strength and voice, share with them. Let them know that some of us do have that type of a story. Thank you again for tuning in to another week and another episode on Double Dose of Raw Talk Podcast. I am your host, Miss T, and you will tune in next week. Bye. Thank you for joining me on this week's episode on Double Dose of Raw Talk Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. And when you leave the review, tell your friends, and then tell your friends to tell their friend. Nothing makes me happier than to read the reviews that you guys are leaving and the feedback I am receiving from my listeners. Trust that I am reading those reviews and I am reading those suggestions and I am listening. Contact me on my social media pages and the show's email. All my information is in the show description. Nothing would make me happier than to hear from you guys and to know what it is that you would love from my platform to cover on some raw talk. So let's talk about it.